Are you tired of getting blurry photos of birds? Do you want to know the correct settings for bird photography? There are many ways to do it. In this video, I'm going to share with you the way I take my bird photos and what I use, the techniques I use. Previous video, and I'll put a link above here for you to click, I described 3 methods for you to take on how to use different settings to get good bird photos. That was just over a 3-minute video, and that's hard to cover 3 methods in 3.5 minutes. So this video, I'm going to focus on one of those 3 methods, and obviously it's going to be the method that I use the most. It's my favorite method. So there are 2 ways to get this method, to achieve what I am after. Both of them are similar. They go for the same results, and they're somewhat similar, but it's dependent on what kind of camera you have for which method you might want to use, or in fact, be able to use. If you did watch my previous video, you'll realize that a fast shutter speed gives you sharper photos, or can give you sharper photos. So I want to get something out of the way right up front. Both of these methods are in aperture priority mode. They're after similar results. It just depends on what camera you have and what the capabilities are for which one you use, or you use a combination of both of them. At the end of the video, I'm going to ask you to tell me which way you use and give me some of your results. So let's get into these 2 methods. The first method is setting a minimum shutter speed on the menu on the back of your camera. I set that to 1/1000, and then I let everything else be an automatic. The second method is if your camera does not support that setting on the back of your camera of a minimum shutter speed, then I go for a fixed ISO, a high fixed ISO. I started a high ISO, and we'll talk about that shortly. If you do have a camera that supports the fast shutter speed, the minimum fast shutter speed setting, here's a link up here on how to set that on my Canon 5D Mark IV and my Canon R5. Both of them have that setting, very similar settings, so check out that video. The benefit of having a minimum shutter speed setting is I can leave my ISO in auto, and I can adjust my aperture, and then my ISO will go up to allow sufficient light. So I just have to watch my light meter to make sure it's not too dark. However, not all cameras have this setting. Some consumer grade models, my Canon 5 Ti, for example, does not have this feature. Some Nikon cameras that are entry level, like my 5 Ti, may not have it either. So what can we do? So this is method number 2. We force the ISO to be high. I started about ISO 1600 when I do not have a minimum shutter speed option. Then I move my aperture down to a low setting, like 2.8 if my camera has that low of a setting, and see what my shutter speed is. If it's not enough, then I increase my ISO a little bit more, maybe to 3200. Now I will keep moving that ISO up until I can get that fast shutter speed. I will sacrifice my shutter speed a little bit if it's dark enough outside that I need to, but maybe 1/500, and you'll see later I've got a photo at 1/250, and you'll see why. So those are the 2 methods. One is a minimum shutter speed in the menu. The second one is force the ISO manually up to 1600 and then move it from there. So here's how I get some photos of my birds. I'll walk you around my backyard a little bit and show you a few items I have in my backyard. So I've got a habitat for birds. If you're walking through the woods and you notice there's no birds chirping, it's probably because there's no food or there's not a habitat for them there. You walk 100 yards through the woods further, you start hearing the birds chirping and singing. There's probably berries, a variety of insects, and things from it. There's food there for them. It's not just happenstance that they show up in certain areas. So if you want birds in your backyard, you want to attract them. And this is how I attract them in my backyard. I have different bird feeders. I got several bird feeders. Some is just for general birds. I have a bird feeder for finch, and the chickadees like it also. I have a bird feeder for my bluebirds, and it keeps mostly just bluebirds in it. It keeps the larger blackbirds out of it. Mealworms are expensive. Bluebirds love mealworms, so I spend a little bit extra on a bluebird feeder so that only the smaller birds can get in. So let me walk you through a few of my photos now that you've seen my yard. This first photo is of a bluebird at 1/250th of a second. For bird photography, that's way below the speed I want to be at. When you look at this photo, you could probably guess why it was blurry. Maybe I was just a little bit out of focus. But when you look around, there's really nothing in focus in this photo. The bird isn't too bad, but it's just a little fuzzy. It could have been camera shake. It could have been the bird moving. Maybe the bird just landed and it still had some motion on it. but at 1/250th of a second is not fast enough to freeze that bird. The second image is of a blue jay that had just taken off. I have my shutter speed at 1/1000, but I zoomed all the way in on the photo. I cropped it way in so that you can see the tips of the wings are blurry. A bird in flight, 1/1000 is not fast enough for most birds. Blue jays are pretty big. So it's not a small bird that the wings are going so fast like a hummingbird. But the wings of this blue jay was fast enough. Even 1/1000 was not fast enough. The third image is that same blue jay you just saw, but it's perched. I'm at 1/1000 of a second. I actually took this photo before the other one. But look how sharp the blue jay is. The blue jay is sharp because the blue jay is sitting still at 1/1000 of a second. Yeah, that's good for a blue jay or any type of bird that's sitting or perched. Check out, even the deer want to get in the photos. I think one of them said you should hit the subscribe and like below, so thanks. Image number 4 is of a mourning dove. Mourning doves aren't my favorite bird, but I love the definitive lions. Their feathers aren't really frazzled. They're very tightly. And look at the eye on this mourning dove. Very, very sharp. They give good crisp lines, so they're good to practice photos with. But she's sitting right smack in the middle of the food. I don't know why she does that. Who knows? Maybe it's to keep the other birds out so they can have it all. The fifth image is of a bluebird on a bluebird house. I've got 2 bluebird houses in my yard, and I have a bluebird feeder, as I mentioned above. This bluebird had built a nest. She had 3 eggs, and the babies made all the way through and flown out. But I shot this at 1/1000 of a second, and it looks tack sharp. Love this one. It's like she's protecting her house, but she hadn't even started building her nest yet. 1/1000. This final photo, I say for last because it's probably the sharpest one, it is 1/1600th of a second. It is of a robin. Robins do not get the credit they deserve. There are so many robins around here. I see 2, 3, 4, 5. If I counted them, I bet you probably close to 100 a day if I'm out and about. But this robin is just tack sharp. Oh, I love this photo. She's just perched up. I'm assuming it's a female. She's beautiful. Look at the color on her, the sharpness. Love this photo. Most of these photos were taken with my Canon R5, a few of them with my Canon 5D Mark IV. Both of these cameras have the minimum shutter speed. The very first one that was 1/250th of a second, I was still learning bird photography. I did not know about that minimum shutter speed setting. I was probably an aperture priority, didn't set a high ISO, and I got a slow shutter speed. So that's why it was probably blurry. But the point you want to get here, the point that you want to learn from this, it doesn't matter if you're shooting an automatic, aperture priority, shutter priority, or one of the 2 techniques I just showed you, the settings that are available to us. It doesn't matter which setting you use. You want to get a fast shutter speed. When someone looks at your photo, they're not going to look at that and go, oh, you shot that in manual mode, or oh, you shot that in automatic. They're just going to look at it and enjoy the photo. It's your idea, it's your job, it's your function to try to get the sharpest photo possible so that they enjoy it. How it shows up on the print, they have no idea. So try out these settings. Give me a comment down below if you're doing bird photography. Do you use these type of settings? What settings do you use? And if you're going to use one of my techniques, let me know which one you used and how it worked out for you. Did you use them one or both? I would really like to hear from you. Give me a comment down below. So at the end of this video, I'm going to give you 2 links. Make sure you check them out. One is a reminder from the previous link I gave you on how to set your minimum shutter speed. And the second one is how to understand the exposure triangle. I'm going to keep pushing that video. It's not got a lot of hits. Check it out. Let me know what you think about it. It is a different way to understand aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, aka the exposure triangle. Check them out. They're really awesome. Hit the subscribe, hit the like, and I will see you next week.